While the police supposed that George Fuchstein was just drunk and fell into the creek and drowned, the papers offered other explanations. Monday, September 28, 1891, the Standard Union. She missed him at the bridge. George Fuchstein and his wife of 1072 Gates Avenue went to visit relatives at 1117 Grand Street yesterday afternoon. The couple left on their way home about 12 o'clock last night. When Mrs. Fuchstein got over the Grand Street Bridge, she missed her husband, but did not bother about him and went home. This morning his drowned body was found in Newtown Creek by Jacob Lilly of 1087 DeKalb Avenue. Monday, September 28, 1891, the Brooklyn Daily Eagle. Death at the Grand Street Bridge. Mysterious disappearance of George Fuchstein in the dark. George Fuchstein of 1072 Gates Avenue visited his brother Michael at 1117 Grand Street yesterday. While returning with his wife and 2 children, he disappeared suddenly from the Grand Street Bridge, and his dead body was fished out of the muddy waters of Newtown Creek this morning. There is some reason to fear that the man was waylaid by the Growler Gang that makes it unsafe for pedestrians to cross the bridge at night. Mrs. Fuchstein was walking ahead with her 2 children. She called to her husband to come on. He replied that he was right behind her and instructed her to go right along. When she had crossed the bridge, she called to her husband again. She received no reply. It was very dark, and through the darkness she heard the voices of several men in conversation. She was thoroughly frightened, and she walked on to the first lamppost. There she waited for a long time. Her children began to cry and were terror-stricken. Not knowing what else to do, she went home. She went out again at daylight, appealing to everyone who crossed the bridge for information of her husband, and then she went to the 6th Precinct station house. Her inquiry had caused some boys to look into the creek. They saw the body floating underwater and dragged it ashore. The police believe the man was drunk and that he fell off the bridge when he stopped to rest. Coroner Lindsay will make a thorough investigation. Monday, September 28, 1891, the Times-Union. Drowned in the creek. A mysterious happening on the Grand Street Bridge. George Fuchstein, while on his way home with his wife and 2 children, drops out of sight in the darkness. His body found today. The police of the 6th Precinct are working on a mysterious case of drowning that happened near the Grand Street Bridge last night. For years, the vicinity of this bridge has been the headquarters of a gang of young men whose sole avocation seems to be to stop passing pedestrians and demand from them the price of a pint of beer. When the pedestrian is able or willing to accede to the demand, he is usually permitted to pass on without molestation, but when the demand is refused, many cases have been made known to the police where savage assaults have been made by the young men who make their headquarters at the spot mentioned. Yesterday afternoon, George Fuchstein of 1072 Gates Avenue, accompanied by his wife and 2 little children, paid a visit to Michael Fuchstein of 1117 Grand Street. Michael, who is the brother of George, lives a short distance beyond the Grand Street Bridge. Mr. and Mrs. Fuchstein left for home about 9:30 o'clock and walked along Grand Street. When they arrived at the bridge, Mr. Fuchstein was some distance behind his wife and children. After crossing the bridge, the woman waited for her husband. She heard loud voices in the darkness that hung over the bridge and called out to her husband to come to her. Receiving no answer, she moved along a short distance to a lamppost, where she again called out his name. No response came, and Mrs. Fuchstein, with her babies crying at her side, waited for 15 minutes for her husband. Then, with thoughts of anguish that can be readily imagined, the wife and mother, afraid to stay longer in the gloomy neighborhood, made her way home with her crying babes. All night long she sat up and waited for her husband's return, hoping for the best. This morning she went to the 6th Precinct station house on Bushwick Avenue. and while she was telling the story of last night's happenings to the sergeant at the desk, word was brought in that the body of a drowned man had been found on the shores of Newtown Creek near the Grand Street Bridge. Mrs. Fuchstein, with tears in her eyes, went to the bridge and there found her husband laying dead on the muddy banks of the creek. Coroner Lindsay was notified, and he will do everything in his power to ascertain just how the unfortunate man came to his death. If he met with violence at the hands of anyone, it will probably never be known as a certainty. The police, while making every effort to unravel the mystery, are of the opinion that Fuchstein fell overboard, although the fact that there is a rather high railing on the bridge would seem to make it impossible for this to have happened. Mrs. Fuchstein is of the opinion that her husband met with foul play, as she is certain that she heard loud voices in the darkness when she missed him.